The power of good physical alignment to support your vagus nerve and to support your nervous system. Why there's a lot of myths and sometimes misunderstanding around the vagus nerve and what is good for the vagus nerve, what's not so good for the vagus nerve, and some of the basics that I would say that many therapists, healers, and even coaches and even physical therapists are thrown out with. It's almost like they're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Okay. So when we think about stress, most people think of stress as just mental and emotional, and they forget the physical component of stress. And of course, lots of things, like, for example, if someone has physical injury or physical trauma, that will impact them mentally and often emotionally. But one of the things that we seem to forget that is so important, that is a huge problem today, is posture and physical alignment. It's basics. If you think about anything, if you have a table in the house or chairs and something's out of alignment, well, guess what? It's wobbly. It's not going to be able to sit, properly. And, there can be accidents, there can be problems. And people's bodies are the exact same. And when you think about even the autonomic nervous system, the nervous system, it's made up of a lot of nerves and linked to a lot of things in relation to the brain to do with the different functions of our body. But the reality is that lots of things can support the nervous system to work better. And there's a lot of things that will put pressure and cause disharmony with the nervous system and the vagus nerve. Now, one of the things that I kind of cringe when I see is lots of training schools who talk about the nervous system and the vagus nerve, or even technology that just goes on about the vagus nerve, and they'll say this device will completely reset your nervous system or your vagus nerve. And the same with lots of tools and techniques. But the problem with that is not all of these tools and techniques are safe for all clients. And like a lot of things in the holistic and wellness sector, there's a lot of things pushed as just being, just ways for certain types of people to make money. And sometimes, they generally think they are doing a great service and they're doing well, but they don't always see the bigger picture. And they don't always see the cracks or where some of these things may not be right for certain types of clients. It's lots of things. So that's why when you're supporting people with their stress and you're trying to support people to have a healthier nervous system, if you do not look at them from a holistic perspective, a whole perspective, and look at what's going on holistically, you can be missing things that are extremely important. That means no matter what you do, that will not be resolved because there's something else that needs resolved. Now, I recently went to, I've been going for about 3 months to what they call an upper cervical chiropractic manipulation, very, very gentle manipulation, and it's mostly just done behind the ear, right, and kind of around this area. Now, one of the reasons that I went to this since I was a child, I've had lots of raised structural issues, right? And I was like most people, had lots of falls, had lots of things, and I just seem to be very unfortunate, right enough. I had a lot of injury to this side, and 2 major incidents with dentists. One, I spent years then going back and forward to maxillofacial after the injury. And then one other one that was major was when I ended up with what they call, I had trismus before, but it's lockjaw. The jaw locks and they can't open it. And I was literally left for about 10 days with only, and no joke, it was about a tiny little millimetre, 2 millimetre that was able to open my mouth. And the only way that I could consume was like soups and things, I had a gap at the back, so I put a straw, and I was left, and I ended up with sepsis, right? And there was a lot of reasons why I got that. First of all, I was given the wrong injection. It hit a nerve that I'd already had an issue with, and already had structural issues, had lots of teeth issues, had lots of, how could you say, misalignment issues and things that seem to be related to my childhood and some other things. For example, as a baby, I was given a medicine that was then taken off the market, and I remember when I started school, the dentist decided to take all my teeth out, and I ended up with all these double teeth and all sorts of things because my mouth shrunk. Now, that's just one example. I'm just one example, but I know I've met many clients along the way, particularly when I done more physical work, right? Most of my work for probably the last 15 years has been online, right? And I did do some work for a little while, but most of it moved. But when I was doing mostly working at, and part of my work was physical therapies, right? And working with people on a one-to-one basis on a physical level. I come across a lot of people that had structural issues, right? Some people had tremendous injury. Some people, maybe it was posture, the type of job they were doing, and sometimes there were rare conditions that would impact. I've got a friend who's a rare form of osteoarthritis, and since she was a child, she had all sorts of problems, and at one point she had to have a metal leg. Now, these are all examples of where there's an imbalance in the body, because when there's structural issues like that, when there's wear and tear, the body kind of is out, it can be out of alignment. And one of the things that I learned when I was trying to really get my strength back after a period of being really ill, I was diagnosed as ME at that point, and then it would later be perceived as if it could have been Lyme's as well in a combination. But one of the problems I had at that point was I was always somebody that was quite motivated, but I just had a problem. After all the things, I had been mercury poisoned, had a lot of things happen, and my nervous system and my immune system was struggling a bit. And I struggled to move to build my stamina. That was one of the biggest things that I really struggled to build my physical stamina. And I remember going to the Alexander technique, and I went to a small class. I found the class quite challenging because at that time I was very exhausted. And then I went to the guy one-to-one. And he showed me how, there were certain muscle types that are supposed to take more of the weight in our body, and are designed to support us, and often we use the wrong muscles. And when we have injury and we have poor posture, or we're sitting, we can't get comfortable, that, we start falling into bad habits. But also from a very young age, most countries and most places in the world were put into seats from a very, very young age, put into chairs, or even put into cars that are not really supporting our body correctly. He also talked about beds. And one of the things that I'll always remember, which really struck with me, he said, think about what people invest in a car. And many people use that to go to work, but they only use it to go to work and come back, and it sits all day, outside the place of work, or even it sits outside the home, whatever, and it's only getting used for short periods of time. And then think about how many hours you spend in a bed. And he says, think about what people invest in their bed and they invest in their car, and how many times people take to replace their bed or replace their mattress. And it was true. Now, there's a lot of things with health that are exactly the same. People don't always prioritise things that will actually make a difference with their health. But sometimes we get into bad habits. Sometimes if we've had injury or structural issues and it's never been resolved. If you think about when someone puts their knee out, or their ankle sometimes, and their arm is very obvious, and it's more obvious, so it can be addressed. But sometimes we have things that are slightly out that actually create incredible problems for us because it's never been resolved. Now, I went to this chiropractor because I was experiencing horrendous pain in my skull, in the back, and I mean extra. I've been someone that's had through the years lots of different types of pain, but this was extraordinary pain. So much so that I don't know how many times just because I had, at this point, extreme noise sensitive seizures as well. So going into hospital, sitting in an ambulance in a waiting area in the way that the NHS was not appealing. But it was so painful that many times I was ready to phone 111 on line 99 because I really felt as if my head was going to explode and I felt something was seriously wrong. And also I started to deteriorate cognitively. A lot of things became very difficult. And some of the symptoms were like, you would say like Alzheimer's, dementia, but also maybe some of the symptoms I have were also similar to a stroke. Now, there's a bit of controversy going on with me at the moment, and that's a whole other thing. But one of the things as well was that I came out of the sepsis after I had the locked jaw and things, and I was very ill. I came out with a lot of bizarre symptoms, and they were never addressed. And a couple of people have said to me through the years, Eileen, you would think you had a stroke, right? But anyway, I goes to this upper because at the time I had horrendous pain. And why I went to this particular person, because it's gone out for me, can be a drama. People have to put blankets, duvets to support me because I can feel so much vibration and also noise and things. But anyway, I was taken to Edinburgh I went to Edinburgh because he had this cone scan. And what appealed to me was the fact you could see, and it's upper cervical they do, so they only focus on upper cervical, but you can see exactly what is going on with their alignment and if there is a structural issue. So right away, it was very apparent there was serious C1 and C2 issues, and it was having a full impact on my whole spine, and also would be, it was all the signs of someone having lots of other complicated issues, but also a lot of these things are linked to problems with the vagus nerve and a whole pile of other things because it can really press on the brainstem. It can press on different nerves, cranial nerves, and all sorts of things that can impact the body in other ways. But what was even more interesting about this was that it revealed a huge bone coming out my ear. It's called an elongated styloid, but mine seems to be really a lot longer than most people, and also had calcification. Lots of things that would explain the horrendous pain that I have been suffering in my ear for about 20 years. That nobody could explain, and there's a lot of people just didn't want to know. And the way I was treated, some of it was as if it could be all in my head. Now, what also this bone revealed is that, and this is called Eagle syndrome, and for people there's all different types of Eagle syndrome and there's different types of symptoms, but when people have it, it can be pushing on the aorta, the vagus nerve, and all sorts of cranial and other nerves, and be very, very dangerous and harmful. And one of the things that I had been suffering from was this choking. And I just had started from January, started having symptoms that I hadn't had before, that when I moved my neck a certain way when I was sleeping, I woke up and felt as if I was having a heart attack. And I started questioning my reality, what was going on, and thinking it's not true. I felt there was actually something structurally. And then I realised it was starting to happen when I sat a certain way. I laid down even in the sofa a certain way, moving a certain way. I would get these almost adrenaline rushes, and something didn't feel right. Now, I was also struggling to breathe. And the symptoms were bizarre. They were bizarre. And, sometimes when we have symptoms that are bizarre, if you're someone that has faced a lot of gaslighting medically, and you've also faced a lot of people who want to put you in a box that you don't really belong, or just want to give you a label because it suits their agenda, then you start questioning your reality, but something felt really wrong and had a lot of other bizarre symptoms. Now, when I went to this, I've discovered so much. And one of the reasons that I went to this chiropractor was I had seen the similar therapy that he does done all over the world, and people having amazing results who had some similar issues that I had, particularly to do with the ear and horrendous pressure and all sorts of balance issues, and also people who maybe after accidents or falls, suddenly their nervous system was not doing right. And there was also a lot of people were labelled FND, but it would turn out there was structural issues. But once they had their structural issues sorted, or people would say that, that they were anxious, they were nervous, they suddenly, after an injury, felt something wasn't right. But after getting this gentle, manipulation, they couldn't believe the difference, that they felt so much better. And one of the things that I noticed very quickly on, and then, yes, some things took a bit longer, and I'm continuing with treatment because I'm someone that's had a long case history since I was a baby. Now, I'm 50. To think about it, I'm 56, right? So, that is a lot of years having structural issues, and then often when we have one thing it's not addressed, or just sometimes life, the body then starts, and my body had started going down on one side like a domino. Right? One of the things that I noticed straight away was I started feeling like a pressure. I couldn't believe that my body was holding this much tightness and pressure, and it was like, as this person done this bit, I could feel the skull releasing. I could feel aspects of this side releasing as well as the back of the skull. I could also feel release in the hip. I've had terrible nerve pain in the back of my hip for years, and I used to have my hip would jam a lot. This released. And by the time I got to my 12th session, I was standing taller. In fact, I think I got to about my ninth or 10, and a friend of mine had come in and hadn't seen me for quite a few weeks because it came, I try to think, it came about my birthday time and I couldn't even function. I was in so much pain at that point. I was just struggling to cope with the pain. And I remember coming in and he said to me, "Oh my God, you look so straight and you look taller." Now I'm only 4'9.5". And one of the things that I noticed was, even though there's still some things that I think I'll need some help with, one of the things that I noticed, my body was able to deal with vibration. I could feel the vibration, but it was not knocking me over. Previously, very interestingly, I was getting knocked over with certain vibrations, and certain vibration, it wasn't just the sound, it was vibration. So say if you think about drilling or something moving. Now that's all to do with the nervous system as well. Now there is other things there, because if you've had lines of bacteria, some of that can attack the nerves. So the nerves sometimes are a little bit more frayed than the normal. But one of the things I noticed straight away, I felt like myself. I said to him, I felt like myself. And I felt as if I couldn't remember feeling as straight. Now, I'm not saying I was not, because I remember as a young girl loving ballet dancing and putting books, but I had to really practice that. But at some level, I hadn't felt straight for so long that when I felt straight, I thought, "Oh my God, I'm straight." And I noticed something to do with my foot. Now, right away, I noticed the difference of me being able to not just cope, I don't mean just mental, the everyday environment of noise and stimulation. Now, I'm not saying I'm completely perfect at things, but my structure of my body felt strong enough to deal with it. And I think this has been a big lesson in me. I talk a lot to my students, always talk about even stress and holistic well-being, and I always talk about, don't fall into the trap because you love like maybe the mental aspect or the emotional or the spiritual or this part, that you get so focused that you miss something obvious with the client and you take them down a road that is not going to really help them that much, because people have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. But one of the things that reminded me is that how much harder it is for the body when it's completely out of structural alignment, right? Because your bones, right, your leg length, your hips, your shoulders, your arms, your head. I mean, just think of the weight of your head alone. And one of the things that my head had kind of was going like this, and I'd done it over so long, and it was struggling. And I had also, just to do with the sepsis, lots of things, I ended up with no teeth at this area, so I had nothing to support, and I had problems holding my plate or anything in. Now, if we think about that from every area of life, if we don't have solid structure, or we can't correct a structure, things topple. And it's the same in your business. It's the same, of course, if you have good mental structures, you need to have good emotional structures and even spiritual structures. But one of the biggest problems we have nowadays is everything, and even in the holistic and wellness field, everything's pushed out as fast tracking. This will solve all your problems. If you learn this, you're going to be an expert and do blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of generalization, overgeneralization. There's a lot of overhype. There's a lot of lack of understanding, lack of awareness, and lots of people who often come into the holistic well-being very young, or only come into one area, have not been taught and they don't have the awareness or understanding to look at things from a wider perspective. Often it's not till you have lots of different types of clients and deal with different situations that you learn the hard way, that maybe sometimes what you've been taught in your training school about being told by someone is not the whole picture. And everyone is different and everyone has different weaknesses. But I think it's really important to go back to basics. And if I had, I had a funny idea, but I had problems. I had went to lots of different types of physical therapists, and I have to be honest, some of them created more problems. And I'm not saying it was necessarily their fault. Sometimes the ego's a wee bit too keen, but also I had no awareness. I had this huge bone pushing in to, vital areas of the body. I didn't know that. I didn't know I'd a massive this coming down. I also had a funny feeling there was something, I felt there was some sort of instability, cervical instability, there's something going on in the upper skull, but I couldn't be sure until I saw it. And sometimes it's like everything. Sometimes we have to see something black and white to actually believe it ourselves. We can add a lot on, and a guidance about things, but I felt as if I was hitting myself against a brick wall with so many people because other people were trying to take me down another rabbit hole. And one of the things I think we have to remember in life is that we all can easily go off in different tangents and focus on different things. I ended up, I have to be honest, putting my attention on lots of different things. And again, forgetting some of the most important basics of where my issues started from a very young child. And as the guy that I'm going in, I will be doing a video with Ryan, who's at the top Chiropractic in Edinburgh, which is the upper cervical clinic for Edinburgh. One of the things that he said, can you imagine if people had some of these issues that you had, or, some of the, the types of injuries or accidents or something early on, and they just get in with a little gentle manipulation right away, how much that would solve and prevent lots of things getting out of hand. And I think this is really important. So when we think about people's nervous system, when you think about their stress, and, sometimes when we perceive people, for example, that have a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress, I've always said this to students: make sure you ask the right questions and listen to what they're saying. So many people nowadays make so many presumptions about their clients. And of course, you've only got a limited time. And sometimes it's even the client. Sometimes I know I've been in situations and had so many things that it's not to have come away and mean, oh, I actually should have that. That would have been more relevant to that. So I should have told them that. And sometimes it's not to your working with person, but don't presume, because assumptions actually destroy the faith, can also destroy your business if you keep making assumptions about your clients that are not true. It can actually destroy your reputation in many ways as well. I've seen that as well, where people, are just so naive and make lots of assumptions that actually cause harm to their clients. But on another level, there's a lot of gaslighting goes on. And unfortunately, the holistic health, wellness, and even the spiritual sector are, it's rife. The reality, and we might not like it, but it's true, it's very rife. So it's important for us to think about how much even checking your own posture and alignment and supporting it. And of course, some of us are a wee bit more, have more issues, and we're trying to address that and understand that, and sometimes people with injury or operations, some things are just slightly out. But the thing is that you've got to support that. If you've got a wobbly desk and a wobbly table and you can't fix, you need to put something in, try and support it as best as possible. And that's why when you are, trying to reset the vagus nerve, and, when you do, if you suspect there's other things going on, it's important to do gentle things and things that are going to be the least invasive. One of the things that I liked about this chiropractic compared to other types of chiropractic was it's very, very gentle and more safe. And they look at the scan and they know exactly where to go, what to do, because they can see it on the scan. But the even procedure is far more gentle and less invasive than other types of chiropractic. And if in doubt, I've always said this to, do things that are more safer, and you can work the client up and test things. But just remember that, the holistic model, it's important to look in all directions and look at people, from a holistic perspective. And not just, one of the biggest things that I saw even in the medical professional, where I feel as if I got a lot of mixed diagnoses. They just looked at the obvious symptoms and didn't want to look at the bigger picture and maybe the source of something. It's like they weren't interested in how the problem started. And sometimes when you find out how a problem started, it gives you a basis of where the breakdown started in the body or the mind or the emotions or spirit. But sometimes there's so much overgeneralization, and also some business models and even some medical models, it feels too uncomfortable to someone if you don't fit in the box. So they want to put you in a box. And if you know in your heart and soul you're not in that box, don't let them bully you into that, because then you prolong getting the help you need. And you can start questioning reality in a way that then causes mental and emotional problems for you. So I hope you've got something out of this video. Now, I just wanted to also say while I'm doing this video, because this is getting up onto the kind of, actually YouTube, the stress coach training YouTube channel. Now, I'm changing. I have started over the last few years just to do a variety of reasons in my life, and also because of some of the cognitive issues that I started facing last year that had a big impact on me. Was that there's a lot of things in my business that I realised that it was just time to let go and to do something that would be more simpler for me, but also where my alignment was going. So there's a lot of things about the stress coach training that I'll not be available anyway at the moment. There is some things that I might come back and do next year, but at the moment, most of my work, if you go to the YouTube channel Eileen Burns, I promote at the moment it's called the Heart Hub, which is an online community and inner sanctuary. And it's basically like an online community, and you get access to a library of resources to help you, relax, get in aligned with yourself, your soul. A monthly healing circle. I'm going to be maybe doing some extra other things. And that is part of the foundation of that. It's actually amalgamating a lot of my work from the kind of more meditation, stress management side and the spiritual aspect. But there's also the soul hub, and that's where a lot of the soul aligned business and marketing. So the Heart Hub is where all the more spiritual or more things to support your nervous system and help you are all inside that. And then the Soul Hub is for people that are more like maybe healers, therapists, or more conscious or soul-led entrepreneurs who want to take their business to a new level. They're looking for a community, and that is like monthly, what we call business brainstorming, co-creation sessions. And then I usually do an extra bonus each month of something that people want a topic on. It'll either be a webinar, I might run some little 4 or 5 days, what we call reboosts, something like a challenge, but not quite a challenge, where you get an opportunity to, build or focus on one area in your business over so many days. So if you would love to learn more about that, or you just want to follow me more, and there's lots of things on the Eileen Burns channel, I'll put the link below. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.